Hello and welcome to Formula One Talk and this review of the final race of the 2012 World Championship from the Interlagos circuit in Brazil. With only 13 points between rivals Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso, the prospects for this one were huge. But first, the news from qualifying that Pastor Maldonado of Williams was handed a 10-place grid penalty due to a weight infringement. This was not the first time this had happened this season, hence his punishment was more severe. There was rain forecast for the race session of varying levels of intensity, but all of the drivers were able to start the race on their slick tyres despite the slippery conditions. Onto the start itself, and Sebastian Vettel had a slow getaway. By contrast, the Ferrari of Felipe Massa had a fantastic start, but as expected from the front of the grid, the two McLarens took the early initiative. Then the race took an interesting turn as the first corner of the second sector, Sebastian Vettel was hit by Bruno Senna, which spun the Red Bull, leaving Sebastian with damage to his car and the car itself facing the wrong way. He needed some luck if he was going to take the title for a third year in succession. The resulting spin took out Senna, Maldonado and the McLaren-bound Sergio Perez, leaving all three drivers out of the race, and in regards to Senna, unsure of his Formula One future. Another driver unsure of his future was Sauber's Kamui Kobayashi, as the Swiss team announced that they have signed Mexican newcomer Esteban Gutierrez to join Nico Hülkenberg at the team for 2013. But Kobayashi was putting in some storming laps and outperforming both championship contenders for prospective future employers to take note of. The Japanese driver literally fighting for his Formula One career. He had nothing to lose and perhaps has a lot to gain. Two McLaren drivers, Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button, were having one last teammate tussle for the lead before Hamilton joins Mercedes next year. The departing Hamilton wanting to leave on a high note on the track where both he and Jenson won their respective world championships. The rain intensified slightly and forced all but two of the remaining drivers into the pits for intermediate tyres. Button stayed out, as did the Force India of Nico Hülkenberg. This decision was risky for the pair, but ultimately paid off as the rain started to ease, as they wound up around 40 seconds ahead of the third-place driver at one stage of the race. The Force India pit wall was celebrating at one point as the young German passed the McLaren on lap 19 in a brilliant move, and it looked like he was beginning to eke out a lead. That was until Nico Rosberg suffered a puncture on his Mercedes on lap 21. There was some debris on the track that caused the safety car to come out 2 laps later. It stayed out for a few laps while the race marshals cleared up the wreckage. After we got going again, Red Bull's Mark Webber wasn't having the best of races, but compared to his previous two, he actually managed to finish this one. Throughout the race, the weather was erratic to say the very least. This caused a multitude of pit stops for the appropriate rubber. The slippery conditions allowed us to see what Kimi Raikkonen had been doing during his time away from Formula One, as he performed a little rallycross down a closed escape road. The Lotus driver had to spin his car round to go back the other way down the slip road and took to the grass to return to the track. The challenging track surface led Nico Hülkenberg to lose control of his car and ploughed into the front left tyre of Lewis Hamilton's McLaren, taking the Englishman out of the race. The Force India didn't get off lightly either, as the race stewards deemed the young German responsible and awarded him a drive-through penalty. By this time, Fernando Alonso was fourth behind his teammate, who was performing well on his home track, and when Hülkenberg came in for his drive-through, Felipe let Alonso pass without much bother, moving him up to second behind Button, who on his slick tyres were beginning to pull away, his wet weather skills possibly the best in F1 at the moment. Sebastian Vettel, meanwhile, was doing just enough to retain the championship lead as he was in 8th position, with Alonso unable to do anything about Button, who was 20 seconds or so ahead. This left Vettel in a comfortable position to win the championship. He passed Kobayashi for 7th and was fast approaching the soon-to-be retiring Michael Schumacher, and in a passing of the torch type moment, the 7-time champion easily let the Red Bull through with no fuss or problems. Sebastian was now in 6th and could have possibly made up more positions if it were not for a crash into the barriers by Paul di Resta of Force India, which brought out the safety car for the second time on the penultimate lap. So the race more or less finished under safety car conditions, with a superb win from Jenson Button in the McLaren, a good second for Fernando Alonso, doing all that he could, and a fantastic third place for Felipe Massa on home territory. But all of this was overshadowed by the achievement of Sebastian Vettel, who crossed the line in 6th place to take the 2012 World Championship, his 3rd in a row. He joined some impressive company as a triple world champion, the likes of Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost and Jackie Stewart, for example. But even a more impressive and exclusive club that have won 3 in a row, first Fangio, then Schumacher and now Sebastian Vettel himself. Now on to the race results, and in first place with a quite magnificent performance in the changeable conditions was Jenson Button in the McLaren. Fernando Alonso did absolutely everything he could to win this championship and obviously win the race. He finished 2nd, Felipe Massa using his home knowledge to finish 3rd. Mark Webber finished 4th, which was quite impressive considering that he had a bit of a scrappy race. Nico Hülkenberg, a fantastic 5th place finish. If it wasn't for the slide into Hamilton, may have won this Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel in 6th place, getting what he needed to win this year's title. Michael Schumacher 7th in his final ever race in Formula 1. Jean-Eric Vergne in the Toro Rosso 8th. Both the Toro Rossos sort of hit each other a little bit earlier on, which left them needing a stop for fresh rubber. Kamui Kobayashi in what could prove to be his last race in Formula 1 with a 9th place. And Kimi Raikkonen, despite going off the track and going wide for several corners in the race, he picks up the final points paying position in 10th. On to the final drivers' standings, and first place and the 3-time world champion Sebastian Vettel with 281 points. Fernando Alonso 2nd by only 3 points on 278. Kimi Raikkonen 3rd, a well-placed 3rd in this year's championship, well-deserved 3rd as well, with 207. Lewis Hamilton 4th, 190. Jenson Button 188. Mark Webber 6th on 179. Felipe Massa 7th on 122. Had a good second half to the season. More to come in the next week or so. Romain Grosjean in the Lotus didn't score. He remained on 96. Nico Rosberg didn't do well after Singapore, really. Didn't score any points at all. 93. Sergio Perez in the Sauber, 66. He'll be looking for a better season next year. Nico Hülkenberg got 63 points for his championship efforts. He was in 11th. Kamui Kobayashi 12th for Sauber with 60. Michael Schumacher with Mercedes, not really capturing the light that he had in his so-called first career. He was on 49 points. Paul di Resta of Force India scored 46 points. He's in 14th. Pastor Maldonado, despite a magnificent win in Spain, scored 15. He was in 15th position and scored 45 points. Bruno Senna 16th in the sister Williams. He scored 31. Jean-Eric Vergne scored 16 points. He was in 17th place, and the final driver to score points was Daniel Ricciardo in 18th, and he scored 10. Now, what was interesting was the fact that Vitaly Petrov finished 11th in yesterday's Grand Prix, overtaking Charles Pic, who was relayed to be joining the Caterham team for the 2013 season. Charles Pic couldn't keep Petrov behind him. As a result, Caterham move above Marussia in the constructors' standings. And speaking of the constructors' standings, Red Bull had already won the Constructors' Championships in Austin, Texas last week. They finished the season on 460 points, 60 ahead of Ferrari. They were on 400. McLaren third on 378. Too many reliability problems and issues this season. They'll look to change that, obviously. Lotus in fourth place. They're on 303. Mercedes fifth. They'll be looking for a much, much better season with their new driver Lewis Hamilton next year. They were finished on 142. Sauber sixth in the Constructors on 126, beating Force India despite a decent race for Force India on 109. Williams 8th place in the Constructors on 76, and Toro Rosso 9th on 26. The three newer teams didn't score a point, but as I just stated, With that 11th place from Vitaly Petrov, the Malaysian squad was able to finish ahead of Marussia in the constructors' standings. So in conclusion, I have to first congratulate Sebastian Vettel on his third successive World Championship win, on the basis of things a richly deserved championship win. Next, I have to say well done to Fernando Alonso, who has quite honestly been the best driver of them all this season, dragging an uncompetitive car around each track most of the time. And kudos to obviously Jenson Button, who took a brilliant win in the treacherous weather conditions to finish out the season. Now, you don't have to wait until 2013 for the next edition of Formula One Talk. In fact, there will be at least another 3 episodes this year, as I plan to give you my full review of the season in 3 separate parts, so that I don't give you a 90+ minute video to watch. So be on the lookout for the first one to be released around about this time next week. So until then, I thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week.